A newly divorced woman bought a flashy red Corvette. While speeding down the highway, she was pulled over. The officer said, "Ma'am, if you give me an excuse I've never heard, I'll let you go." She replied, "Last week, my husband ran off with a cop. I thought you were trying to bring him back." The officer laughed so hard he let her go. Mary and Jane are old friends. They have both been married to their husbands for a long time. Mary is upset because she thinks her husband doesn't find her attractive anymore. "As I get older, he doesn't bother to look at me," Mary cries. "I'm so sorry for you. As I get older, my husband says, I get more beautiful every day," replies Jane. "Yes, but your husband's an antique dealer." The person sitting next to me on a flight was a woman. Ever the charmer, I used one of my pickup lines on her. I asked, "Does the airline charge you extra for sitting next to good-looking men?" "Yes," she replied, "but I wasn't willing to pay." A blonde visited a doctor. Woman: "Doctor, I have a problem. I am..." Doctor: "I know your problem. You always dream that you have become a donkey, right?" Blonde: "How do you know?" Doctor: "Your ponytail hairstyle." Little Johnny is always being teased by the other neighborhood boys for being stupid. Their favorite joke is to offer Johnny his choice between a nickel and a dime, and little Johnny always takes the nickel. One day, after Johnny takes the nickel, a neighbor takes him aside and says, "Johnny, those boys are making fun of you. Don't you know that a dime is worth more than a nickel, even though the nickel's bigger?" Johnny grins and says, "Well, if I took the dime, they'd stop doing it, and so far I've made $20. Three brothers were trying to impress their mom with the best 90th birthday gift. The first said, "I built you a mansion." The second bragged, "I got you a Tesla with a personal chauffeur." The third smirked, "I sent you a parrot trained to recite the entire Bible." A week later, she sent thank you notes. To Gerard, "The house is too big." To Howard, "The driver is rude." To Norman, "The chicken was delicious." Little Johnny approaches his mother one day with a request that warms her heart. Johnny: "Mom, can I have 50 cents? Mother, feeling proud: "Why do you need 50 cents, dear?" Johnny: "I want to give it to an old lady that I saw in the park today." His mother is moved by her son's thoughtfulness and generosity. She quickly reaches into her purse and hands him the 50 cents, feeling proud of her son's kind gesture. As she gives him the coins, his mother says, "Here you go, darling. I'm curious, can't the poor old lady work anymore?" Little Johnny takes the money with a bright smile and replies, "Oh, she can work all right. She sells candy in the park." Three women die together in an accident and go to heaven. When they get there, St. Peter says, "We only have one rule here in heaven: don't step on the ducks." So they enter heaven, and sure enough, there are ducks all over the place. It is almost impossible not to step on a duck, and although they try their best to avoid them, the first woman accidentally steps on one. Along comes St. Peter with the ugliest man she ever saw. St. Peter chains them together and says, "Your punishment for stepping on a duck is to spend eternity chained to this ugly man." The next day, the second woman steps accidentally on a duck, and along comes St. Peter, who doesn't miss a thing. With him is another extremely ugly man. He chains them together with the same admonishment as for the first woman. The third woman has observed all this, and not wanting to be chained for all eternity to an ugly man, is very, very careful where she steps. She manages to go months without stepping on any ducks. But one day, St. Peter comes up to her with the most handsome man she has ever laid eyes on. Very tall, long eyelashes, muscular St. Dot Peter chains them together without saying a word. The happy woman says, "I wonder what I did to deserve being chained to you for all of eternity." The guy says, "I don't know about you, but I stepped on a duck." A wife had a splitting headache on Halloween night and told her husband to go to the party without her. Although he insisted on staying home, she encouraged him to go have fun, assuring him that she just needed some rest. So he grabbed his costume and headed to the party. A while later, the wife's headache disappeared, and feeling a bit mischievous, she decided to surprise him at the party. Since her husband didn't know what costume she'd wear, she figured she'd watch him from the shadows and see what he got up to without her around. When she arrived, she quickly spotted him, dancing wildly, flirting, and cozying up to every attractive woman on the dance floor. Chuckling to herself, she decided to join the fun. She sidled up to him, and without recognizing her, he was instantly captivated by her yod disguise. They danced, laughed, and eventually snuck out for a steamy session in the car. Just before midnight, she slipped away, went home, and was in bed by the time he returned. When he got in, she casually asked, "So, did you have fun at the party?" He sighed and replied, the usual. Didn't dance once. Just ended up in the back room with Pete, Bill, and the guys playing poker." Feigning surprise, she said, "Really? You must have looked ridiculous playing poker in that costume." He grinned and said, "Oh, I wouldn't know. I gave my costume to your ex. Seemed like he had quite the night." An elderly man walked into McDonald's, ordered a single meal, one hamburger, a side of fries, and a drink. He unwrapped the hamburger, carefully split it in half, and placed one half in front of his wife. Then he meticulously counted out the fries, dividing them into 2 even piles. They shared the drink, each taking a small sip before setting the cup between them. As he started eating his half of the burger, people around them began to notice. Whispers spread. "Look at that poor old couple. They can only afford one meal." Touched, a young man approached their table and politely offered to buy them another meal. The old man smiled and explained, "We're just fine, thank you. We're used to sharing everything." But as the meal continued, people couldn't help but notice that the elderly woman still hadn't eaten a single bite. She watched her husband, occasionally taking sips from the drink. Concerned, the young man returned and urged them again to let him buy another meal. This time, the old woman spoke up. "Thank you, but we really are used to sharing everything." Finally, as the old man finished his last bite and wiped his mouth with a napkin, the young man leaned down to the woman and gently asked, "What is it you're waiting for?" With a smile, she replied, "The teeth." A local news station was doing a feature on an 80-year-old woman who had just tied the knot for the 4th time. The reporter, curious about her life and this new chapter, asked her how it felt to marry again at such a milestone age, and then inquired about her new husband's profession. "He's a funeral director," she replied with a hint of pride. The reporter, intrigued by this, decided to dig deeper. "Would you mind sharing a bit about your first 3 husbands and their careers?" he asked. She took a moment, her eyes twinkling as she reflected on the many years gone by. With a smile, she recounted her past. "I married my first husband, a banker, in my 20s. In my 40s, I married a circus ringmaster. My third husband was a preacher when I was in my 60s, and now here I am in my 80s, married to a funeral director." The reporter, visibly surprised by the wide range of professions, couldn't help but ask, "What made you choose husbands with such different careers?" "Wait for it." With a playful grin, she responded, "Well, you see, I married 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready, and 4 to go." "All right, now go ahead and share this with someone who could use a good laugh." While on a golf tour in Ireland, Tiger Woods pulls up to a petrol station in the middle of the Irish countryside in his BMW. The attendant, having no idea who Tiger is, greets him warmly in the traditional Irish way, "Top of the morning to you, sir," says the attendant. Tiger nods politely and reaches for the petrol nozzle. As he does, 2 golf tees slip out of his pocket and fall to the ground. The attendant looks down, puzzled, and asks, "What are those?" "They're tees," Tiger replies. "Well, what in God's name are they for?" asks the Irishman, clearly confused. "They're for resting my balls on when I'm driving," Tiger explains with a grin. The Irishman's eyes widen in disbelief. "Fucking Jesus," he says, "BMW thinks of everything." 2 best friends, Tim and Sarah, loved candy more than anything else. Every day after school, they would stop by the corner store and buy bags of gummy bears, chocolate bars, and lollipops. They'd sit on the park bench, munching away and laughing about how they could eat candy forever. One day, Sarah noticed Tim wasn't eating his usual candy stash. Instead, he was munching on a boring apple. "What's going on?" Sarah asked, her mouth full of gummy worms. "Why aren't you eating candy? Did you run out of money?" Tim shook his head nervously. "No, it's not that. I think I need to stop eating candy for a while." "Why?" Sarah gasped, horrified. "Candy is life." Tim leaned in and whispered, "Because I think I'm turning into candy." Sarah burst out laughing. "What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. I'm serious." Tim insisted. "Look at this." He rolled up his sleeve and showed her his arm. Sure enough, there were tiny, colorful speckles on his skin that looked like sprinkles. Sarah's eyes widened. "Whoa, that's weird. But maybe it's just a rash or something?" Tim shook his head. "No, it's not just that. Yesterday I sneezed and a jelly bean came out." Sarah stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or scream. "Okay, that's gross, but also kinda cool." Tim sighed. "I'm scared, Sarah. What if I turn into a giant gummy bear or something?" Sarah patted his shoulder. "Don't worry, Tim. If you turn into candy, I'll still be your friend. I'll just eat you slowly." Tim groaned. "That's not helping." The next day, Sarah showed up to school with a bag of carrots instead of her usual candy. Tim raised an eyebrow. "What's this? Since when do you eat vegetables?" Sarah sighed. "I think I need to stop eating candy too." "Why?" Tim asked. "Don't tell me you're turning into candy too." Sarah shook her head. "No, but last night I had a dream that I was a chocolate bar, and someone bit my arm off. I woke up and my arm was sticky." Tim laughed. "Okay, that's it. No more candy for either of us." They both agreed to quit candy cold turkey. But a week later, Tim caught Sarah sneaking a chocolate bar behind the school dumpster. "Sarah," he yelled, "what are you doing?" She froze, chocolate smeared all over her face. "I couldn't help it, Tim. I was craving it so bad." Tim crossed his arms. "Well, don't come crying to me when you wake up as a giant lollipop." Sarah grinned. "If I turn into a lollipop, at least I'll be delicious." In a small, picturesque village, a couple was widely admired for their astonishing vitality. The husband, an impressive 102 years old, and his wife, a sprightly 98, were both in remarkable health. They worked tirelessly on their farm every day, their youthful energy defying their years. One afternoon, a curious visitor arrived at the farm, eager to learn the secret behind their longevity. He found the old man chopping wood, shirtless, his sweat-covered physique looking decades younger than his age. Introducing himself, the visitor exclaimed, "I hear you're 102 years old." "That's right," the old man replied with a warm smile. "Incredible. You look amazing," the visitor marveled. "Thank you," said the old man modestly. "Do you mind if I ask how I've stayed so healthy at this age?" the old man interjected, knowingly. "Help me carry this wood to the house, and I'll tell you." The visitor eagerly agreed, and together they hauled the wood inside. Once they were settled, the old man began to share his story. "You see," he said, "I've been married for 75 years. Early on in our marriage, the wife and I made a little agreement. Whenever we had an argument, the one who lost would have to run 5 kilometers. He chuckled before continuing. We've had a pretty typical marriage, so I've been running 5 kilometers almost every day for the past 75 years. That's why I'm in such good shape. The visitor, still puzzled, asked, "But if that's the case, how is your wife in such great shape too?" The old man grinned mischievously. "Oh, that's simple. She usually runs after me to make sure I finish the whole 5.